All right, knife sharpening 101 with the guided field sharpener. So the first thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna basically take my knife and I'm gonna put some Sharpie on the edge. So if I'm sharpening this way, I'm gonna put some Sharpie on the bottom edge, the one that's gonna be against the stone. And I'm just gonna get it on the shiny part, basically that very edge bevel, right? So I'll Sharpie that so it's all black. Okay, and then I'm gonna do a couple passes on my rough grit stone, probably 2 or 3, and then I'm gonna see how the Sharpie gets removed, and then we'll kind of go from there, and that will help us determine how far off our angle is. So we have our rough grit, and I'm gonna put the blade flat against this angle here because that's at 20-degree angle, okay? And then I'm basically just gonna push down and away. Doesn't need a lot of pressure. Just try to keep it even the whole time. And since this blade has a little bit of curve, I'm gonna kind of curve with it as I go. So I'm pushing down and away. And I don't really want to run the tip off of the sharpener because that's gonna dull my tip. So I'm gonna stop before the tip falls off. So going down and away. And we'll take a look at our Sharpie. And so, it's kind of hard to see on the black blade, but basically what you're gonna get is one of 3 things. One is if the angle on your knife is exactly 20 degrees, which it probably is never gonna be, then you'll completely remove all that Sharpie. It'll be all the way gone on the shiny part on the bevel. If you get number 1 like that, so basically that means that my Sharpie is removed from the shoulder, but it's not removed from the tip, then that means that my knife is either cut thicker than 20 degrees. If that's the case, then you're gonna kind of reprofile it, so it's gonna take a little bit of time to knock that shoulder off, so you're gonna spend a lot longer on that first stone than you would think. And if you get number 2 down there, and you have marker just on the shoulder and the very tip, the marker is worn off, that means your knife is a little thinner than 20 degrees. Like a lot of kitchen knives are cut to 15 degrees instead of 20. So if you get that, that means that 1 of 2 things. That either means that your knife is a little thinner than 20 degrees, like if it's a kitchen knife, or that means that when you're doing your sharpening, instead of laying it perfectly flat against the angle like that, you're doing this, okay? So I would recommend doing all push strokes first. So in this case, I'm pretty close to that 20 degrees, so I'm just gonna kind of keep going with that. Most knives are gonna be off a little, just from the factory, because basically what they do is they just take the knife and they just roll it against a belt sander. So it's not gonna be perfect all the way across. Almost no knife is perfectly cut to 20 degrees from the start, especially from your first sharpen. So your first sharpen will take a little longer. Once you get it cut to that 20 degrees, the next time you sharpen, it should be pretty much right on that, and it'll be easier and faster, okay? So, basically, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna keep doing these push strokes. So I'm gonna keep pushing this on here, laying it flat against that angle guide, push in. And I'll do probably 5 or so. And then what I'm checking for is the burr. So basically, the burr is gonna curl, when I'm pushing against the stone, the burr at a microscopic level is gonna curl up away from the stone, okay? So what I'm feeling for is I'm gonna pull down, and when I feel it kind of grab my finger, that's that burr that's curled up, that's grabbing as I roll down, because it's rolling up away from me, right? So I have a burr on some of the blade, like I have a burr back here, but I don't have it near the tip as much as I want it to. But I want it to grab my finger pretty good when I pull down. So I'm gonna just keep going. Again, that just means that that blade isn't perfectly even all the way across. So I'm just gonna keep going until I get that perfectly even and flat. So I'm gonna do another 5 strokes or so. And I'm going to feel for that burr again. Do a couple more. Okay, I'm pulling down. Okay, and I feel that burr basically all the way through. So I feel it pulling down against me. Okay. This knife's not super dull, so it is going to go quicker than normal, but just for purposes of the video. And then basically all I'm going to do is, now that I have that burr curled up away from me this way, right, going this way, I'm going to do my strokes the opposite way, and I'm going to move that burr so it's going the opposite direction. So I'm going to do the same thing, exact same thing, but I'm going towards me. Okay, so I'm starting down low, trying to keep it on that angle flat, and I'm pulling up and away. Slow is fine. Okay, so I'm pulling up like that, trying to keep it nice and flat the whole time and not rolling that tip off. Okay, so I'm going to do 5 or so strokes on that, and then again I'm going to pull down, and I do not feel a burr, so it's not curled up towards me, so that means I just got to keep going. Okay. Okay, and now I feel burr. So when I pull down against the blade, again, that burr's curling up away from the stone. So I feel that burr, and I do feel it all the way through. So that means that I'm done with that stone. Again, it might take longer. If it's a cheaper steel, it'll be shorter time to get that burr. If it's a harder steel, like a pocket knife that's a little nicer pocket knife, it's a harder blade, so it'll take a little longer to sharpen. It might take more strokes, but basically you're just looking for that burr. If I don't have that burr all the way across, I'm going to keep going. If I don't feel a burr at all, I'm going to keep going. And now I'm moving on to my second stone. Okay, so second stone here, same exact process. What I would recommend is to again put marker on the edge of the blade, the one that's going to be down against the stone, and do a couple strokes again. This second stone is also 20 degrees, so it should be the exact same angle as your previous one. So you cut it at 20 degrees with that first stone. This second stone, you're again cutting it, but a little bit more refined at 20 degrees. So if I do a couple passes with this with a marker, and I take a look, and I get number 2, let's say, for example, let's say if I get this, where I have marker at the top of my bevel, but I'm knocking the marker off the bottom, that most likely means, since it's the exact same angle, what it means is that, again, I'm accidentally, instead of going flat, I'm rolling the blade up a little bit. Okay, so make sure, go nice and slow, make sure that you're keeping it nice and flat. You get kind of better at it as you do it more, because those should be the exact same angle. So if that point, it's not removing the marker evenly, then that's on you. That's your hand changing it. Okay, it should be moving it perfectly evenly. Okay, and then so I'm going to do probably less. Usually as you go, you have to do less strokes, but just kind of depends. I should still be able to feel a burr on this one too. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put the blade against here. I'm going to do, let's say, and this isn't going to be accurate to maybe your normal knives, but let's say I do 5, 6, 7, 8 strokes, something like that. And then I'm pulling down against the blade, and I don't feel a burr yet. I'm going to keep going. Okay. Again, trying to maintain that same angle. And you can do this nice and slow. It doesn't matter what speed you do it. And you don't have to put a ton of pressure against it either. Okay. Okay, pull down. I feel a burr through the belly, but I don't feel a burr here or here, so I'm just going to keep going. Okay. And I'm going to keep going with this push stroke until I feel that burr rolling up against me and catch my finger. And so let's say that right there, now I feel a burr and it's all the way across and it's catching my finger. Now I'm going to switch to the other side, and I'm going to do my pull strokes the same way until I feel that burr. It should be pretty close to the same amount of full strokes, but it's not always the same. Okay. So then again, I'm just rolling that burr the other direction. So when I pull down against the blade, let's say like that, I should feel a burr pulling up against me. If I don't feel it all the way across, keep going, right? And you can do the marker trick for both sides if you want and see if you're moving that evenly or if you're changing your hand, you know, moving the blade up too much or whatever. And then we're gonna go and we're gonna move to our coarse ceramic after that. Now the coarse ceramic, if I were to put marker on this, and then do the coarse ceramic is actually a 25-degree angle. So it's up just a little bit more than the typical angle. So if you did the marker on there and then you did a couple strokes on the ceramics, you might notice that you're removing just the edge because the angle is a little steeper, right? So you'd be removing the marker just from here. That's on purpose for this system. It's called a Micro Bevel. That's kind of a whole nother topic, but basically you get your main edge and then you get a slightly steeper edge at the very end, and that's to give you basically better cutting angle at the top, and then an edge that lasts a little bit longer by doing it a little steeper at the bottom. It's a lot of knives come like that from the factory too. So basically it's a slightly different angle. So if you do the marker, like I said, you should see just the edge of your bevel, the marker getting removed. But basically on these, you're not going to be able to feel for the bevel or for the burr anymore, because that burr, it's no longer making large changes, curling up a lot or curling down a lot, because as we refine more and more, it's just a very slight change up or down. So on these, I'm not gonna actually feel it. So I would recommend doing probably 10 strokes one way and 10 strokes the other, or something like that. So I would do 10 on here, same way. Again, don't let the tip come off of the spine of that. So I'd just maybe do 10 here. On these ones, it's a little bit more blind because you can't feel that burr at this point. It's getting too small, okay? And then the same way I do my 10 strokes, come in the opposite direction towards me, okay? Right, and then I'd go to my fine ceramic. I would do the exact same thing, probably 10 strokes and 10 strokes there. And then your burr is now so small that you shouldn't be able to really feel it, again. So, and then what we're doing is on the strop, we're just basically, we're no longer cutting any metal off or removing any metal. And again, that burr is very small. So what we're trying to do is basically that little curve in the burr, we're just trying to get that as even as possible, as straight as possible, so that you get the best cutting performance. So you can't really overstrop. I would say probably 20 or so on each side is pretty good. It's just going to kind of polish the edge and get that burr nice and straight. And because we're moving that burr back and forth such a small amount, we can go back and forth. Okay, so instead of doing all one direction, we'll put it on here. It's a reverse. So we're going to put it on here against that angle. Okay, and then we're going to come up until we hit the leather, and then we're going to pull away. Okay, so for example, we're coming up till we hit the leather. Once we hit the leather, we pull away. If you're cutting your leather, then you're at too steep of an angle, right? You shouldn't be cutting it. So again, don't roll the tip off. Just come up till you feel it kind of grab against the leather, and then rock it off. So it's the exact reverse of what you've been doing before, okay? Both sides. Again, on these, you can do basically back and forth. So you can do one here and one the other direction. So back and forth. And again, you're not going to feel a burr. At this point, the burr should be really small and difficult to feel any change in, okay? And again, this just kind of polishes the edge and gets that last little bit of kind of crazy sharp. Some people, when their knife gets a little bit dull but doesn't need like a full resharpening, they'll just do this for 20 or so times and just kind of touch the edge back up. And all that does is basically that, again, that burr rolled a little bit and you're just straightening it out a little bit, okay? So then now basically you should have a nice edge on there. It should cut paper very easily diagonally. You should be able to do the finger test where you kind of, put your fingernail down, or you can do it with Sharpie, right? At about a 45, and just kind of touch the edge all the way along and see if it sticks. It should basically stick to your fingernail or to the marker. If there's a spot where it slides off, again, that part of your knife is dull. So that means you kind of, when you were feeling for your burr, you kind of missed that spot, right? So, again, that's something that's a little bit better to check for how your knife's getting dull over time. But anyway, so now you should be able to basically do a diagonal paper cut really easily. And it should be, I'd say at least as sharp as the factory, if not slightly sharper. And you should, it'll be close to shaving sharp. You might be able to shave with it, you might not. It's going to be a little bit more of like a working edge. So that's usually better for cutting through like cardboard or like kitchen knives. You kind of want a working edge on it. You can put a super glassy edge on it if you get stones that get smaller and smaller grits. But they're good. They're better for push cuts, but they're worse for kind of sawing type of motions, because basically you don't have micro serrations that help you kind of saw. So, you know, again, that's a whole nother topic, but basically you should have a nice edge from that. A couple things to note with different knife styles. If you have a knife that's straight, like this one, I'm not going to roll it because there's no curve in the blade, right? You got to kind of follow that curve with your blade. So if it's a straight one like this, I'm going to push straight down when I go to sharpen, and I'm going to pull straight up. Now the stone's not as wide as the blade, so I'm going to push down here, I'm going to move over a little bit, push down here, move over, push down here, again, not rolling the tip off of the thing, just straight down, straight up. The same thing is true if you have a larger or longer knife, like a hunting knife or a kitchen knife that's just much longer. You might not be able to roll through and get it all the way done in one pass. You might do half the blade and then the other half of the blade, or a third of the blade and the other third. Again, just keep, you know, going successfully forward towards the point, and do all that one side at once and just feel for the burr all the way across. And then a couple things to note: if you have like a kitchen knife, like a thin steak knife or like a chef's knife or a paring knife, they're typically cut a little bit thinner than like a pocket knife. This is set to 20 degrees, which is 90% of knives out there. So pocket knives, hunting knives, outdoor knives, most of those are going to be 20 degrees. Sometimes kitchen knives are 15 degrees instead. So if when you do that marker trick, you notice that you're closer to the edge, so you're doing this, basically, you're knocking off the tip, but not the shoulder. That's just because that knife is cut a little thinner, and that's okay. Basically, you're just going to kind of, you know, make it 20 degrees at that edge. That's going to work just fine. If you keep resharpening with your same sharpener, it'll just sharpen up, you know, even easier the next time. Again, if you have a knife where you have, you're knocking off the shoulder, but there's marker on the tip, again, that could just mean that your marker, or that your knife is thicker as well. And if you have a thicker knife and you notice that you're knocking off that shoulder, that just kind of tells you you're going to have to kind of reprofile it if you want to use the system to sharpen it and continue sharpening it. So it'll just take quite a while longer on that first stone. If it's really different, like if you're just knocking off the shoulder and you're not even getting close to the apex, this probably isn't the right system to sharpen that. So that, you know, might be like an axe or something, they're cut really wide. You can sharpen things like that on here, but you've basically got to do it freehand, like just a typical whetstone. So you've got to basically just find that angle yourself by just kind of slowly rocking, you know, this on here until it kind of looks like it's the right angle, and then go for it. But it's definitely quite a bit harder. Other things to note. Oh yeah, so then after you sharpen a couple knives with this, these do pop off. They're just magneted on. So you can take these off just like that. There's a little storage thingy inside and instructions and all that. And then basically what I would do to clean them, because they'll get a bunch of stuff, you know, little metal flakes in there, and then they won't sharpen as well. They won't cut the metal very easily anymore. It'll get kind of gray and all that. What you do is basically just take this, run it under the sink, and just kind of run your finger over it. And you'll get some, you know, black stuff over your fingers. So just do that with both of them after every few sharpenings or so. Like I said, otherwise they just kind of get gunked up. And then they just magnet right back on. So same with the other side too. And then these are diamonds, so they do last quite a while, but they can be replaced. You can buy replacement ones pretty cheap and just snap on new ones. Same with the leather strop. Again, this green compound is kind of, it has a little bit of like diamond grit in it. So eventually it'll just kind of, you'll just completely blacken this, and that kind of grit will go away and it won't work as well anymore. And you can replace that as well. But they should last a long time. Same with the ceramics. So they're replaceable. Yeah, so hopefully that answers most questions. Like I said, every knife is going to be a little bit different in what angle they're cut at. If I buy 10 Kershaws, they might all be slightly different angles. One might be 21 degrees, one might be 22, one might be 19, one might be 20. It's just basically, again, imperfections in the process of when they go to sharpen it on the belt. You know what I mean? They just push it against the belt at roughly 20 degrees, and it's not, you know, ever cut exactly perfect. You'll notice with higher end knives that angle is closer, so you'll have less to do the first time you kind of sharpen. You have less reprofiling essentially to do. But really, I've found pretty much no knife is exactly on. But yeah, so hopefully that answers most of your questions there. Like I said, the softer steels, the cheaper knives, your kitchen knives and things like that, they're going to sharpen a lot faster. The ones like pocket knives or the higher end knives that are a little bit harder, they're going to take longer to sharpen. And that's just because it's harder. It takes more time to remove metal. But they will keep an edge longer. So the first time you sharpen any knife, it's going to take a while longer to kind of cut that right 20-degree angle, and then you can kind of continue with that from there. Yeah, so like I said, just use that marker trick and just feel for that burr. You know, if you don't feel a burr, then you're not ready to move on to the next stone from your first two, basically. Again, on the ceramics, you're not going to feel a burr. On the strop, you're not going to feel a burr. So just give it a good 10 to 20 or so. Hopefully that clears things up. Just try it on a bunch of knives and kind of see. You'll get the hang of it. Like I said, you'll also learn that just, you know, no knife is exactly perfect at 20 degrees. So just kind of try it out, and then you'll start to learn also when you sharpen kind of what knives are a little bit easier, a little bit harder to sharpen, or what hold edges longer or whatever, and that'll kind of affect your knife buying in the future probably. So yeah, hopefully that was made sense, but let me know if you have questions.